So we'll have another bow and then recite the four great vows. Bow. I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. I am very happy today to be able to share and explore an absolutely wonderful sutra. This is the Samdhinirmocana Sutra. Sometimes it's translated as unlocking the mysteries, explanation of the profound secrets, or the sutra which decisively reveals the intention. This sutra showed up as early as the first or second century, definitely not any later than the third century, because we began to see significant commentaries written on it by the fourth century by such august characters such as Asanga. This sutra, as far as I'm aware, as far as I've been able to track down, is the Yogacara Sutra. There are many Yogacara texts that take the form of treaties or commentaries, but when it comes to a sutra, this is the one, as far as I know. So we should explore a little bit about what that means, because along with the rise or the formation of the Yogacara school, this was also known as the third turning of the Dharma wheel. So what does that mean? Well, the first turning of the Dharma wheel is attributed to the historical Shakyamuni Buddha, who turned the wheel of the Dharma during his first presentation of Buddha Dharma. And it is looked at as being connected to the Theravada school, so the study of the ancients. And their highest teaching was the Abhidharma. And it's important to recognize that in this first turning of the Dharma wheel, that they recognized that there were absolutely real phenomena. In the Abhidharma, there are consciousness, mental factors, materiality. These are all conditioned phenomena, but you can't reduce the experience of conditioned reality into anything more fundamental than those three groups. There is also the unconditioned, that being nirvana. So in the Abhidharma, you have these four absolutely real groups of things. The conditioned being what is created, the unconditioned being what is uncreated, nirvana. In the second turning, this is where we began to see the introduction and evolution of the Mahayana. And it was with the Madhyamaka school, the school that Nagarjuna is attributed to, and the Prajnaparamita sutras. So in this turning of the wheel, phenomena are no longer looked at as being real, like absolutely real. In the second turning, phenomena are actually looked at as being absolutely unreal. So in the first turning, they were looked at as being real, even these conditioned, because they were interdependent. Whereas in the second turning, in the Prajnaparamita lineage, they were looked at as being unreal or empty because they were dependent. Now we move into this new turning, this third turning of the Dharma wheel, which is also a Mahayana, but it first shows up with this Yogacara tradition. And it sort of reconciles the two. There's actually a chapter in the sutra where there's a character who asks, well, Buddha, why did you teach that there's all of these different types of phenomena? You got the Four Noble Truths, you got the 18 realms, you got like all of these lists, lists after lists after lists. And you were talking about these like these were real things. But then you went and you taught that they're all empty, that they're all fundamentally or absolutely lacking their own essence. Why is that? So that's one of the questions that this sutra seeks to answer. So it reconciles. And it does this in just an absolutely wonderful way. And the later iterations, the later evolutions of Buddhist thought are kind of all built upon this. Anything having to do with Tathagata or the womb of the Buddha, or one of the translations that I like for it is the matrix of the thus come one. Now you'll see that in a very popular translation of the Shurangama Sutra. So the Tathagata, as well as any Buddha nature thought, Buddha nature doctrine, it all has this Yogacara investigation as its foundation. So it's very important. And as we look into the development of the Chan school, Chan very much has this as its foundation. One of the descriptors of Yogacara is that it's the mind only or the consciousness only school. And you don't have to look very far into Chan literature before you start seeing these exact same descriptors. Master Huang Bo says that there is just this mind and so many others. So it's very important for us as interested investigators into practice to have an understanding of where this all came from and how it fits. So, without any further ado, I want to jump into this just absolute marvel of a sutra. And I use a number of different translations. There are parts where one translation I feel reads a little bit easier, and then other parts that I definitely feel another translator did a better job. The two that I refer to most, this is Wisdom of the Buddha, the Samdhinirmocana Sutra. Um, I don't have the, so this is by John Powers. And then also Buddhist Yoga, and this is a translation by Thomas Cleary. The John Powers translation is based off of a Tibetan translation, and so they actually organize a little bit differently. The text is the same, but they have a different number of chapters than Buddhist Yoga by Thomas Cleary, which is off of a Chinese translation. I mean, both of these are absolutely wonderful, but as an investigator, you will find that the more difficult parts of the sutra are translated differently. Like there are parts that are just very hard to understand, even having multiple translations. So you can imagine how much difficulty a translator actually has with it. And they definitely have to take some leaps of faith. But when we have the luxury of being able to look at multiple translations, it can help us to feel what was trying to be communicated, even if the translations are very different. And there are times when they seem to be saying almost opposite things, but when you look at them side by side and in the context of the various readings, you can develop this genuine feel because it is beyond words and phrases. That's something that actually shows up a lot in this sutra. It showed up a lot in the second turning, the Prajnaparamita scriptures as well. But this beyond words and phrases, but still trying to communicate the meaning is an important theme of the Samdhinirmocana Sutra. So I want to start us off by looking at the setting because from the very beginning, trying to imagine or feel what the authors are describing can put us in a more proper frame of mind. So it begins, thus have I heard. The Bhagavan was dwelling in an immeasurable palace, arrayed with the supreme brilliance of the seven precious substances, emanating great rays of light that suffused innumerable universes. So a huge, immeasurable palace that is bedecked with all of the most beautiful things. And it goes a little bit further in describing well apportioned into distinctive sections. It was limitless in reach, an unimpeded mandala, a sphere of activity completely transcending the three worldly realms, arisen from the root of supreme virtue that transcends the world. Already, this is communicating a tremendous amount of information. It's trying to describe something that can't actually appear, not normally in this world. And it reminds me very much of the beginning of the Vimalakirti Sutra, where the Buddha is describing to the gathering um, how bodhisattvas, through their various actions, they prepare their future Buddha fields for an awakening. And, if you cultivate these qualities, you will attract these kind of followers, and eventually your Buddha field will look like this. And Sariputra, who is listening to this, long description, thinks to himself, "Man, this place right here, this isn't so nice. This world is just filled with all kinds of thorns, all kinds of ups and downs. Man, I guess that the Buddha's karma must not be that good if this is his Buddha land." And the Buddha, being the Buddha, knew exactly what Sariputra was thinking. So he said, "Sariputra, hold on right there. Let me show you what I see." And so he touches his toe to the ground, like his big toe, he just barely touches it. And immediately it is transformed. Everyone who is in the assembly sees just this expansive, perfect Pure Land, just in all directions. So this is the mind of the Buddha, the mind of realization, that it dwells in this immeasurable palace. There's no end, there's no beginning to it, and that it is perfectly pure. We can only describe it in the most coarse of terms, that it's covered in gold, silver, lapis lazuli, all of these other gems. But it is beyond that. It is beyond any worldly frame of reference. And so this is the position from which the sutra is being presented. And in this sutra, only bodhisattvas come to ask the Buddha questions or to have interactions with him. So this is just an important beginning. So in the first chapter, you've got these two bodhisattvas who are talking to one another, and they've got really long, hard to pronounce names. So the first one is Vidivatpariprachaka, who is questioning Gambi Rartha Samdhinirmocana. So logical questioner is asking questions of the explainer of the thought of profound meaning. So this sutra is actually arranged in 10 different chapters, and each chapter has a different bodhisattva. And just in this first one, there are two bodhisattvas who are interacting with one another. But in all future chapters, it's one bodhisattva interacting with the Buddha. And by looking at their names, this is another thing that can give you a clue as to the flavor or the deeper meaning that is hidden behind the words. So this bodhisattva is asking about the ultimate whose character is inexpressible and non-dual. So he asks, how is it that all phenomena are non-dual? From the very beginning, this is looked at as being sort of what the sutra is exploring. The sutra is looking into the ultimate, the absolute, the really real, I suppose that you could say. And what happens in this sutra or in this chapter sets the stage for all future chapters, which is why I'm going to spend as much time with this one chapter as I am. So, son of good lineage, with respect to all phenomena are of just two kinds, compounded and uncompounded. And I'm actually going to change to a different translation because I feel that it makes it a little bit easier. So, created and uncreated. So, all phenomena are of two kinds, created and uncreated. But then he goes on to say, of these, the created are neither created nor uncreated, and the uncreated too are neither uncreated nor created. Now, this is a response that is going to hugely confuse logical questioner because this does not conform to a worldly or a samsaric logic. So he's like, how is it that the created is neither created nor uncreated, and that the uncreated is neither uncreated nor created? So the answers created is an artificial definition temporarily set up by the Buddha. As such, it is a verbal expression assembled by conceptualization. So it is all just based on concepts, ideas. If a verbal expression assembled by if it is a verbal expression assembled by conceptualization, ultimately it is a verbal expression of various conceptualizations, and it is not actually real. Therefore, it is not created. In the other translation, it says that it cannot be established. So anything that shows up in terms of a descriptor, in terms of an idea to divide things, to divide phenomena, it is all just made up of these concepts. And so ultimately, it is not real. It cannot actually be established. Now, this very much goes in line with the prajna paramita thought process, where it just sort of undermines the ability to establish any kind of phenomena. It goes on. If you say it is uncreated, this too comes down to a matter of words. If you talk about anything outside of the created and the uncreated, the same thing applies. You can see that this is a direct assault on the first turning, where they had those two different categories of phenomena. They had the created or conditioned phenomena. Remember, that is consciousness, mental factors, and materiality. And then the uncreated, the unconditioned, which is nirvana. However, the this this bodhisattva goes on, says that does not mean, however, that there is nothing being discussed, because there's a tendency, there's a temptation to fall into nihilism, where that there's just absolutely nothing, that there's just this void that is an empty vacuity. But that's not what is happening. So he asks, so what is that thing? So what is it that is actually being discussed? Sages, with their knowledge and vision, detach from names and words, and therefore actualize enlightenment. Then, because they wish to make others aware of this nature that is beyond words, they temporarily set up names and characteristics and call something created or call something uncreated. So these words, these definitions, all of these verbal expressions that either you hear a teacher or presenter say them or you read them in the sutras, anything having to do with Buddha Dharma, it is all about bringing the mind towards a realization. bringing the mind towards a realization of that which is beyond words and phrases. So this is very important. This is very good stuff. We have to keep in mind that all of the words, all of the teachings are just this way. Master Lin Chi, who is a very well-known Chan master, he said that in all of his exposition, that there is no real doctrine here. There is only medicine for the times. And any teaching that is spoken, you should not memorize it. You should not write it down and look to it as being absolute truth. There were many Chan and Zen masters through the years who actually disallowed people to record what they said. I remember reading about a Zen master, Bankei, who wouldn't let his disciples write down what he said, specifically for this reason, because they're just medicine for the times. But some of his disciples disobeyed, and so they would hide little pieces of paper in their the sleeves of their robes, and so they would scribble down, and then they would record later on. With Master Huangbo, he met with this lay person who, after he received these teachings, would go home and record everything. In a lot of ways, I'm very grateful that these students didn't pay heed to this particular injunction, because these teachings are available to us today, and they're just absolutely wonderful. So, moving along from this first chapter, there is there's just so much wonderful material in this sutra. And I know I've already been presenting this on multiple occasions. It's impossible to get through. It's even impossible to go through and just do the bullet points, the important things from each chapter, because there's not enough time. So I'm going to try to share with you what I have personally found to be the most applicable in my own practice experience. And this next bit is the introduction of Chitta, Manas, and Vijnana. So it has to do with the translation mind, thought, and consciousness. So when this sutra is talking about phenomena, this is what it introduces. It introduces mind, thought, and consciousness. So chitta being what it calls mind, mind just being like this general awareness. Manas is being thought, that's like a reflection of mind. And Vijnana being consciousness. So I will show how it introduces that. So this is the Buddha talking with Bodhisattva Visalamati, whose name means extensive intelligence. And he asks, just how are bodhisattvas wise with respect to the secrets of mind, thought, and consciousness? So the Buddha answers, Visalamati, whatever type of sentient being there may be in this cyclic existence with its six kinds of beings, this is the six realms, hell dweller, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigod, and God. Those sentient beings manifest a body and arise within states of birth. Initially, in dependence upon two types of appropriation: the appropriation of the physical sense powers associated with a support. So this is the support of the physical sense powers is going to be the body. So there is this appropriation of physical senses and their support, the body, and the appropriation of predispositions, which proliferate conventional designation with respect to signs, names, and concepts. So this is just our habitual tendencies. This is the appropriation of the predispositions towards a sense of self. towards ideation, towards thinking, towards consciousness. The mind which has all seeds ripens. It develops, increases, and expands in its operations. So, this mind which has all seeds, this is, as far as I have been able to uncover, the very first reference to a very important concept called the Alaya Vijnana, or the storehouse consciousness. And this is something that gets later unpacked and evolves in so many different ways in the Buddhist tradition. But this, these two sets, the appropriating consciousness and the basis consciousness, the storehouse consciousness, this is how the sutra, how the third turning of the wheel describes how a sentient being comes about. So the appropriating consciousness holds and appropriates the body. So it's actually consciousness that creates the body. The body does not create the consciousness from this perspective, from this schema, from this new turning. And it is called the basis or the storehouse consciousness because there is the same establishment and abiding within those bodies. So there's this abiding within consciousness, and this consciousness produces the body. It goes on to talk about the sixfold collection of consciousness: the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. So these six consciousnesses, which we're probably very familiar with from the Heart Sutra, arises depending upon and abiding in that appropriating consciousness. So they do not arise on their own. They arise from this more expansive consciousness. So it says an eye consciousness arises depending on an eye and a form in association with consciousness. Functioning together with that eye consciousness, a conceptual mental consciousness arises at the same time, having the same objective reference. So it goes on to say that it can happen with all of the different consciousness simultaneously. So as we examine our experience, there is this direct sensory mm, aspect of our experiences. Not only our five consciousnesses, but our six consciousness, because we can experience some purely mental phenomena, things like anger, things like greed, that don't have a physical correspondence per se. And they have like this feeling to them. There is a base visceral experience of them. But arising at the same time as all of these other consciousnesses, there is a conceptual mental consciousness that arises at the same time. So if we are to look at this present moment, for example, um, we hear things. There is some guy who's talking. We see things. Maybe we're looking at the computer screen. We're looking at the background behind. We're feeling things. We're feeling the sensations of the body, the sensations of the clothes on the body. Maybe there is something in the body that in the environment that they're aware of in terms of smell. Maybe there's a taste in our mouth. My mouth is very dry right now because I've been talking, and so it has a taste that I'm aware of. There is this explosion of sensory information, moment to moment to moment. And along with that, coming with it, is this an extra layer of imposed conceptuality, the conceptuality of the labels that go along with things. So there's that sound. And what is that sound? Oh, that's Ian. That's that guy. There's this panorama of form directly in front of the eyes. And the mind can now look at all of these different things and say, oh, that's a statue, that's a statue, that's a wall hanging of the Buddha. And it gives names to all of these things. This thought is like the manas consciousness. The in later Yogacara developments, they gave this manas, which is just looked at or labeled as thought here, as its entire layer of consciousness, and it is looked at as being the defiling influence because this is where the sense of self comes from. So we have this alaya vijnana, which later on they call the eighth consciousness. That's where everything is stored. We have the seventh, the manas, that is the ego, the sense of self, the mind's ability to reflect on one thing at a time. And in that reflection, perfume it. So it talked about the mind, which has all seeds earlier. Those seeds are these karmic seeds stored in consciousness. So let's take this moment, for example. We have this explosion of sensory information that is streaming out of the alaya vijnana, because the alaya vijnana not only stores our habitual tendencies, but it stores really everything. And so our experience of consciousness is this tightly divided experience of the alaya Vijnana. In the Theravada Buddhism, the original descriptor, alaya shows up as just a general description of the field, our field of experience. So it's like all that stuff that we experience. And the Buddha says that immature sentient beings delight in alaya. But what do we delight in? We delight in the experience or the perception that there's all of these different separate things. That my eye consciousness is separate from my ear consciousness. That statue is separate from that statue. So this delighting in alaya that the Buddha describes isn't necessarily that we're really enjoying the experience, but we delight in transforming our experience into the experience of a world of cut and tight boundaries. There's me, there's you, there's up, there's down, there's good, there's bad. And I delight in being able to make all of these distinctions. This is what consciousness and this is what manas seems to do. This is how we, in the Yogacara tradition, they labeled those potential functions of mind. So in this moment, there's this guy who's talking. Or there's this, first of all, there's just this experience of form, and the mind begins to reflect on it, saying that, okay, there's this oval shape. Here's this extra little thing here. Oh, we got these sloping things. I bet that's a person. So our I consciousness has now fed into our six consciousness, our mental consciousness, and provided a label. Ah, that is a person. That's Ian. Whatever the label that we have access to. If you don't know me, if it's just a weird looking guy, maybe, or it's just a person. But then this manas, this seventh level of consciousness, it looks up into the alaya, the eighth, and says, hey, what do we got on this? What do we have that I can add? So the eighth consciousness begins to rain down these, they call them bija seeds, bija being seeds. So these seeds begin to rain down from where they've been stored in alaya. And it depends on what those seeds are, but they perfume our experience. So maybe you had a bad interaction with me in the past. I showed up and like Vimalakirti, I harshly criticized you. And so you don't like me. The Bija seed rains down and it's a memory. Oh man, he showed up and he just told me that I was doing it wrong. And another Bija seed. I felt bad about it. Another Bija seed. I don't like this guy. Another bija seed. That's a bad person. So these bija seeds are going up and they're coming down because that's what this Alaya Vijnana does. The Alaya Vijnana, in its afflicted form, serves as a basis for the storing of karma. And it is this seventh consciousness, the manas, our sense of self, which facilitates the putting up of seeds and the drawing down of seeds. In its pure form, all of these levels of consciousness are totally neutral. It's just the apparent functioning of this mind. This is just how mind seems to work. But as this sense of self begins to perfume the experience, that's when we begin to look at it as an affliction. That is how a lot of teachers, they refer to outflows because karma seems to be generated. And Master Linchi, that very famous master, he cautions a number of times in his presentations. You better beware because if you generate this kind of karma that I'm describing, you could be born in the belly of a donkey or a cow. You could just be creating hellish mouth karma. So at this level, this is a level where there are all of these divisions, and Vijnana is a wonderful word to explore and understand because this is what the sense consciousness, you've got the appropriating consciousness, the basis or the storehouse consciousness, all of these things use that word Vijnana. And Vijnana is like two pieces. The first part is the V, separate or apart, and the second being knowledge. So this experience, this um, unbelievable, unimaginable experience is divided and categorized. So this is how the the text describes mind, thought, and consciousness, or chitta, manas, and vijnana. Because the chitta, or translated as mind here, is not the same. Well, it's not. It is the same mind that the Chan masters are talking about, but it's also not really. So to kind of back that up, I do have a little quick reading from Master Linchi. So Master Linchi says, the reality of mind is formless and permeates all directions. In some Yogacara explorations, they actually have a ninth consciousness, which is a purified Alaya Vijnana, and it is formless. You can't pick somewhere out and be like, so where am I storing my karma? Where does that go? Where does that come from? Because it's formless. It cannot actually be found. And you can never escape it. You can't get away from the karma because it permeates all directions. So, but Master Linchi continues. In the eye, it is called seeing. In the ear, hearing. In the nose, sense of smell. In the mouth, it talks and argues. In the hands, it holds and grasps. In the feet, it moves and runs. So Master Linchi is demonstrating here that It's all mind. Whatever our imaginary division is, it is just mind. So he continues, fundamentally, it is a single pure light. And then he says it divides to form the six compounds of sensory experience. And I would introduce or recommend that it appears to divide to form the six compounds of sensory division or sensory experience. Just this mind is what there is. And this mind seems to divide. This mind seems to reflect and separate, one thing at a time. And in the immediate next chapter, there is introduced another just incredibly useful tool for us. So now we're talking about phenomena. So, and this is this root of virtue. So this is Gunakarna is talking to the Buddha. So he's like, what is, you speak of a bodhisattva being familiar with the characteristics of phenomena. To what does this refer? And how is such a bodhisattva being defined? So the Buddha responds, phenomena all have three kinds of characteristics. So it doesn't matter what it is, any phenomena that you can think of, any phenomena that you can imagine, they all have three characteristics. First is the characteristic of mere conceptual grasping. Second is the characteristic of dependent origination. Third is the perfect characteristic of reality. So the merely conceptual characteristic of phenomena, as grasped, refers to the differences in the identities of things as provisionally defined by names in order to talk about them. So any name, any mark, anything that can be described. And for any phenomena that we can imagine, we can describe it. We can use words to describe it. So you've got a brass statue that's, I don't know, about 18 inches tall. We've got a jade statue, which is only about 12 inches tall. We have a human man, long hair, big beard, glasses. We have a mental state. Anger, it feels hot, it feels red. I feel all this stuff in my chest. Anything that can be used to describe. This is the conceptual characteristic or the conceptual nature of the thing, of the phenomena. The characteristic of dependent origination of phenomena means that the inherent nature of all things is dependent origination. So let me read that again. The characteristic of dependent origination of phenomena means that the inherent nature of things is dependent origination. If you've ever listened to me talk, if you ever listened to my Master Gilbert talk, you have heard pratitya samutpada. Causes and conditions never fail. This is the inherent nature of things. Causes and conditions never fail. So he goes on, when something exists, then something else exists. When something is produced, something else is produced. For example, ignorance, conditions, actions, and so on, ultimately bringing together a mass of suffering. So this is a descriptor of dependent origination, the 12 nidanas. In old Buddhism, pratitya samutpada, causes and conditions never fail. Whatever that thing is, it did not create itself. Some people, whenever they come up to me and they're like, "Oh, I'm like really independent person. I don't depend on other people." My immediate thought a question I want to ask them is, "So, did you birth yourself, or were there other people involved?" All things, all appearances depend on many causes and conditions for their arising. This is something that we kind of have an understanding of. But the more that we look into it, the deeper that it is. Um, some of the teachings talk about how in one phenomena, all other phenomena are contained. If we even think about just the appearance of this strange appearance, that conceptually we can label as a human being an Ian, but the dependent nature of it is so much deeper than that. Because for this to appear right here, there were parents, there were grandparents. There's been 40 years of food and beverage at this point and shelter. And all of those other things depended upon other things. And all of those things depended upon other things. One author, one commentator, Reb Anderson, who I actually got a lot of for getting through this sutra, he described this nature, the dependent nature, as being the mystery, just the mystery. So we think we know what things are. That's the conceptual nature. That is the label that we put on things. But the inherent nature of all things is dependent origination, is just this expansive mystery. Things things, begatting things, going back endlessly and without limit or boundary. This is the second characteristic. The third characteristic, the perfect characteristic of reality in phenomena, is true thusness, which is equal in all things. Enlightening beings can realize this true thusness by diligent effort, right attention, and unperverted thought. When we invest in the conceptual nature of things as being their true nature, this is perverted thought. This is, um, sometimes they'll talk about it as an inversion. It's upside down. If we think that the label that we grant to things is their nature, we simply do not understand that thing. Realizing this and gradually cultivating this realization, they will ultimately reach true enlightenment and then witness it fully. Now, to help with these three natures, I'm going to reference this is Buddha Nature by Sally B. King. Just another absolutely wonderful, uh, just absolutely wonderful. So, in this, she talks about the discriminating nature being the conceptual, is established on this is from the Buddha Nature Treatise, is established on the basis of the use of the language of provisional speech. So it's the speech that we use. If there were no such terms, then the discriminating nature would not come into being. Therefore, you should know that this nature is merely a matter of verbal expression. In reality, it has no essence and no properties. This is what is called the discriminating nature. The relative nature is the principle that manifests as the 12-fold chain of conditioned arising. Because it serves as a basis for the discriminating nature, it is established as the relative nature. So this relative nature, pratitya samutpada, serves as the basis for discriminating nature because it is in ignorance that this discriminating nature is generated and invested in, except in the case of um, wisdom, in which case names can be introduced to put an end to names. This is what thusness is. Many Chan masters talk about using poison to fight poison. So this is using a method or using a concept in teaching to bring about an end to these harmful perpetuations of concepts. The true nature is the thusness of all things. It is the non-discriminating wisdom realm of the wise. For the sake of purifying the first two nature, realizing the third, and cultivating all virtues, the true nature is established. And just to give you a handle, a way to use this, this is some of Sally B. King's commentary. So she says, in short, all three natures indicate ways in which, one, reality presents itself to persons, and two, persons experience reality. I replace persons with mind, but the two elements are inherent in each nature. Each has both subjective and objective qualities. The discriminating nature then indicates both a deluded person and a fragmented reality, with delusion defined as the experiential reality based on language. The relative nature indicates a person with partial understanding of the way things are, and a reality in which all things are interdependent and relative. The true nature indicates both the way things are, just thus, and the undiluted beholding of the way things are. And using what the Samdhinirmocana Sutra has been presenting, what this means is that as the mind becomes more and more clear as to what's going on, it doesn't buy into, doesn't invest in the conceptual nature of things. It begins to see things as consciousness. Um, Consciousness, form, there's just this interdependence of activity leading to some kind of experience, its dependent nature. But in the true thusness of things, it is just mind. Mind on one side, mind on the other. And I've got one more section that I want to spend a little bit of time with because all of this has been laying the ground for this chapter with Maitreya, love. And as I was studying and highlighting and thinking about how to present this today, I was recognizing that in this chapter, Maitreya is having the most back and forth with the Buddha. So that this chapter is like an expression of love, an expression of the Buddhas for us that can really help uplift our practice. So the Buddha says, Bodhisattvas listen carefully to the teachings. So the question is, how can bodhisattvas seek tranquility and perfect observation based on these four kinds of objects? The four kinds aren't as important for our purposes, but tranquility and observation, samatha in vipassana. You may be familiar with these. So the answer is bodhisattvas listen carefully to the teachings I have devised for them, assimilate them, become familiar with them, reflect on them, and arrive at insight into them. So we really, with great sincerity, we listen to the teachings and we investigate. We do our best to imply. Then, in solitude, they attentively meditate on these principles for careful reflection. They then attentively meditate on the inner stream of the meditating consciousness. This is mind looking at mind. This is something that the many Chan masters say. They talk about turning the mind's eye inwards. So it's no longer a person that is looking at some external doctrine. There's this investigation in mind that is happening, and mind is looking at it. When they practice correctly in this way, they are very calm and stable, giving rise to physical and mental ease, freedom and ease of body and mind. This is called tranquility. This is how bodhisattvas can seek tranquility. So I've got to jump around a little bit because I know that we're running out of time, and I want to give you some of the just the glorious payoff. So the Buddha and Maitreya are having a back and forth. So if Maitreya asked, if people naturally dwell on mental images such as form, so he's already recognizing that our experience of form is just a mental image. Our experience of sound is also an experience of form. It's just a mental image. It's something that appears in mind, something that is made out of other mental constructions. Master Han Shan, he talks about the the shortcut. This is a 16th century master, Chan master, and he says that the shortcut is to recognize. Well, I'll tell you specifically what he says according to this translation. Those who practice and have recently generated the Bodhi mind should have the conviction in the teaching of mind only. The Buddha has said the three realms are mind only. This is the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. So these three realms are just mind, mind only. And the myriad dharmas, so all the phenomena are mere consciousness, just consciousness, because they are divisions. They're divisions that are based upon a conceptual cutting up. There's this and then there's that. And it's just consciousness. Remember, separate knowledge or separate knowing. Hanshan goes on to say, all Buddha Dharma is only further exposition on these two lines, so that everyone will be able to distinguish, understand, and generate faith in this reality. So all Buddha Dharma, including this sutra that we're looking at, is just an exposition on these two lines. The three realms are mind only, and the myriad dharmas are mere consciousness. So back to Maitreya and the Buddha. So Maitreya asked, if people naturally dwell on mental images such as form, are these too no different from mind? And the Buddha answered, they are also no different, but because of faulty awareness of these images, ignorant people do not realize that they are only consciousness, and so they misunderstand them, because there is this habitual and reflexive investment in the conceptual nature of thing as their true nature. We don't understand. We don't understand that this is just mind, because there is this the so-called activity of the self that is always perfuming what is arising in consciousness. It is always interjecting the idea of self, always interjecting the ideas or the dualities of, of inside and outside, mine and yours. And because of this, we have a faulty awareness, or at least an experience of awareness that doesn't concord with the way that things are. So Maitreya inquired, what is to be called the sole practice of observation? And the Buddha said, if one continuously focuses attention on meditation, on mere appearances, on mental appearances. So this is the sole practice of observation. The only thing that can ever be observed are mental appearances. So even if we're to look at this experience that we're having right now from a purely materialistic standpoint, where do you see me? Where do you hear me? Do you think you see me on your computer screen? That you hear me out of those speakers? This is a great misapprehension. Even if we're just looking at things in terms of materiality, what you are actually seeing is light that is coming through the eye, getting turned upside down by the little weird thing that we have in there and striking the retina. And that light is getting transformed into electrical signals. That electrical signals is then appearing in consciousness or as consciousness. But we immediately and reflexively think that we see the world out there, but there is just consciousness, and consciousness is just a, a div, a, uh, an illusory and arbitrary division of mind. The sole practice of observation is just the continual focus of attention on mental appearances as mental appearances. There's a piece in the Chan liturgy. It says, to know the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, perceive that all of Dharma Dhatu nature is created by the mind. Everything is created by the mind. So I'm going to jump now to this is Master Hongren, and Master Hongren is the fifth patriarch, and he's talking about sort of his recommendations for practice. So he says, gently quiet your mind. I will teach you how to do this once again because you've heard it before. Make your body and mind pure and peaceful without any discriminative thinking at all. So just look at this. It's a reflection of what the Samdhinirmocana Sutra was saying about calming, mental and physical pliancy. Sit properly with the body erect. Regulate the breath and concentrate the mind so that it is not within you, not outside of you, and not in any intermediate location. We're not buying in or investing in this discriminative duality of inside and outside or in the middle. Those are just arbitrary mental designations. They're just concepts. Do this carefully and naturally. So we're not being forceful. View your own consciousness tranquilly and attentively so that you can see how it is always moving, like flowing water or a glittering mirage. You're just looking at consciousness. You're just looking at mind. That's all that you're doing. That's all that you are ever doing. But when you're sitting to practice, when you're developing this samadhi power or this samatha, vipassana power, the samatha is being unwavering in not focusing on any one thing. So if while you're sitting in meditation and there's a loud sound that happens in the environment, the Chan Hall at DDRC, the floors and the walls crack. They just make a tremendous racket. And there's that habitual response. Oh, what was that? Where was that? Oh, I heard that sound. It was over there. So we're not focusing on any of those specific things because there's the recognition, there's the vipassana, the insight that it's just mind. It's just mind. So he goes on, after you have perceived this consciousness, simply continue to view it gently and naturally without the consciousness assuming any fixed position inside or outside of yourself. Do this tranquilly and attentively until its fluctuations dissolve into peaceful stability. If you can practice, if you can just look at this experience as just mind, everything that happens, you have that thought. This is just created by the mind. This is like using the dependent nature of things. The Samdhinirmocana Sutra actually recommends that you start by focusing on the dependent nature of things. Pratitya samutpada, causes and conditions never fail. Whatever it is that appears in mind is created by mind. It's all just created by the mind. And so if you can do this continuously, all of these fluctuations, all of this being pushed and pulled by the environment, dissolve into peaceful stability. And then he says, this flowing consciousness will disappear like a gust of wind. When this flowing consciousness disappears, all one's illusions will disappear along with it. Even the extremely subtle illusions of bodhisattvas of the 10th stage. All the illusions go. Mind remains. Mind can't go anywhere. But the illusions, the buying into the illusions, blows away like a gentle wind. When this consciousness and false cognition of the body have disappeared, one's mind becomes peacefully stable, simple, and pure. I cannot describe it any further. Just mind. Just mind. Master Hongzhi goes on to say, any person who can avoid losing sight of this mind, just this peacefully stable, simple, and pure mind, during all his actions and in the face of the five desires, the five sense desires, and the eight winds, success and failure, defamation and praise, honor and abuse, suffering and pleasure, has established their pure practice, done that which must be done, and will never again be born into the realm of birth and death. This is Master Hongzhi's description of using poison to fight poison, because he's telling you that you have to do something. But we're going to jump back to Han Shan really quickly. Han Shan, who says, generally speaking, in this Dharma ending age, and this was 500 years ago, there are more people who practice than people who truly have realization. There are more people who waste their efforts than those who derive power. Why is this? They do not exert their effort directly and do not know the shortcut. Instead, they merely fill their minds and past knowledge of words and language based on what they have heard, or measure things by means of their emotional discriminations, or they suppress deluded thoughts and try not to think, or they dazzle themselves with visionary astonishment at the sensory gates. These practitioners, they grab a hold of the conceptual nature or just the appearances of things, and they grab a hold of them as if they were real. They delight in alaya. The shortcut that he's talking about is very clear in this next paragraph. In order to engage in practice, you must first sever knowledge and understanding and single-mindedly exert all of your efforts on one thought. Have a firm conviction in your own true mind that originally it is pure and clear without the slightest lingering thing. It is bright and perfect, and it pervades throughout the Dharma Dhatu. This is the Chan school's subitism, or sudden practice, sudden enlightenment. Instead of developing, instead of trying to change, instead of trying to purify or trying to get rid of, this is interacting with this experience, interacting with mind as though the things are actually real. And so this restricts mind's awareness or experience to the conceptual realm, the conceptual nature of things. Instead of cleaving straight through to the absolute, the pure nature, just this mind. He goes on to say, intrinsically, there is no body, mind, or world, nor are there any deluded thoughts and emotional conceptions. All of these things are just illusions. Everything that manifests before you are illusory and insubstantial. If it's a thing, it's just an appearance. And Master Lin Chi says that whatever it is that appears in front of you, shine through it. Mind shines through the appearance of separateness. Mind shines through the appearance of division, of duality, returning to mind, simply illuminating mind. Everything that manifests before you now are illusory and insubstantial, all of which are reflections projected from the true mind. And I would add on, projected on the true mind, from mind, on mind. Consciousness, ego, none of this can create. Master Lin Chi, who, he warned a bunch in his talk. Oh, you better watch out. All this hellish karma that you're creating could end you up in a bad place. But then he also said, I've been looking for this thing called karma for 12 years. I haven't found anything so much the size of a mustard seed of this thing called karma. This mind only approach that was heralded in this sutra, in Yogacara, is everywhere in Chan. But Chan does not restrict itself to any approach, any perspective. Chan will produce anything that is medicine for the times, medicine for this situation, because this is how mind functions. Mind functions to and then I have to stop because I can't say anything else. It appears to function in all sort of ways. It appears to function in that bodhisattvas and Buddhas appear in the world to lead sentient beings to awakening. But mind just functions. And that function is perfect stillness, uncorruptible. And it's everywhere. It is in all times and in all spaces. And this is the shortcut. This is what we return to. We, in our practice, can focus on the dependent nature, beginning to break through our, our just unbelievable addiction to the conceptual nature or the conceptual defining of things. Instead, we remember that it doesn't matter what the thought is, what the appearance is. That's created by the mind. That's created by the mind. And as we can do this, it begins to transform our experience. It transforms our experience of always being pushed and pulled around into one that is, as Master Hongren put it, simple stability, purity. And that's it. You can't describe it anymore. But this mind functions. As Master Han Shan says, this mind, to practice, means to harmonize with whatever state of mind you're in. So it is always generating these illusory appearances, leading to the realization of harmony, moment to moment, the demonstration of compassion, moment to moment, the alleviation of what we believe to be our bondage, our problems, moment to moment. So I hope that you can look into this mind, that you can realize this mind, because it is your mind. It is your true nature, not your identity, not your sense of self, not your thoughts, not your beliefs, not your emotions. This mind is your true nature. So I want to thank you all so much in putting up with my long-windedness. Another one of Master Linshi says, actually, he signs off on his longest recorded teaching. He says that there is no end to this trashy talk. So thank you for coming. I hope that you got something that you can put into practice. I am sorry for any of the mistakes that have come into this presentation. Those purely belong to me. And anything that brings benefit, I can solely place at the feet of my master Gilbert and my other teachers. Amitofo.